Clean out your desk by the close of business today. Human resources will process your exit documents. The message on my monitor blurred as I read it again. After 5 years of loyal service to Peak Valley Shipping, all I received was an impersonal email. 3 days. That's all I had taken to lay my mother to rest. 3 days of approved bereavement leave. We need employees who make their work a priority, the email continued, as if attending my mother's funeral was some optional event I'd chosen instead of completing quarterly reports. I leaned back in my chair, the leather creaking in the quiet of the early morning. The Seattle office was still nearly empty, the sky just starting to brighten with daybreak. I had arrived early, eager to catch up on work after my short absence. My name is Morgan Reynolds, and until roughly 2 minutes ago, I was the district team leader of the highest performing division at Peak Valley Shipping. At 34, I had built not just a career, but a team that felt like family. We shared birthdays, supported each other through hard times, and encouraged each other to grow professionally. I glanced around my workspace, the small succulent my team had given me last Christmas, the framed photo of all of us at the company retreat, the handwritten notes from team members I'd mentored. 5 years of my life condensed into a few personal items that would fit in a cardboard box. The termination notice attached to the email was signed by Greg Turner, my immediate supervisor who had personally approved my bereavement leave just last week. Failure to maintain adequate presence during essential operational periods, it stated. My mother's death apparently coincided with one of these undefined essential periods. I didn't cry. I didn't pound my desk or march into Greg's office demanding an explanation. Instead, I took out my phone and photographed the email, then forwarded it to my personal account. Then I turned off my computer, stood up, and began methodically packing my belongings. By the time other employees started arriving, my desk was half cleared. Samantha from accounting was the first to notice. "Morgan, what's happening?" she asked, her eyes widening at the sight of my box. "I've been terminated," I replied simply. "What? Why?" Apparently taking approved bereavement leave to bury my mother wasn't demonstrating proper commitment to my work. Samantha's expression changed from confusion to outrage. "That's not right. Have you spoken to Richard? The district manager should hear about this." "No," I said carefully, wrapping my succulent in newspaper. "I'm not going to challenge it, but I won't forget it either." When you work closely with people for years, you learn to read their expressions. As I continued packing, more of my team members arrived. Eric was the first of my direct reports to hear the news, his usual friendly smile disappearing instantly. "This is ridiculous," he started, but I stopped him with a small shake of my head. "It's finished, Eric. Greg made his choice. But we just completed the Westview merger last month. Profits are up 18% this quarter because of your strategy." I smiled sadly. Apparently that wasn't sufficient. By 9:30, all 7 of my core team members had gathered around my desk in silent support. Nathan, our logistics specialist who rarely displayed emotion, looked ready to put his fist through a wall. Rebecca, our client relations manager, was openly weeping. Behind them stood Chris, Angela, Monica, Sophia, and Jack, each with expressions ranging from shock to fury. "You can't go," Rebecca insisted. "The Thompson account renewal is next week. The Rodriguez shipping contract is in negotiations. None of us understands the system like you do." I finished taping up my box. Greg should have considered that before he fired me for attending my mother's funeral. The weight of what I'd just said hung in the air. My mother, gone just a week ago, the funeral soil still fresh, and now this betrayal from a company I had given my heart to. "I need everyone back at their workstations," came a sharp voice from behind us. Greg Turner stood there, arms crossed, his narrow face set in a disapproving frown. "We have deadlines to meet." No one moved. "Right now," he added, his voice rising slightly. After a long moment, my team dispersed, each giving me a meaningful look as they returned to their desks. Greg approached me, lowering his voice. "This could have been handled more discreetly if you'd waited until the end of day to pack up." I met his gaze steadily. Like the discretion you showed in firing me by email after approving my bereavement leave? His jaw tightened. Business requirements change quickly. Peak Valley needs employees who understand that priorities shift. Your mother's passing was unfortunate, but don't, I warned, my voice deadly calm. Don't finish that sentence, Greg. For a moment, something like uncertainty flickered across his face. Then he straightened, adjusting his tie. Human Resources is expecting you. Please don't make this more complicated than necessary. I picked up my box. Don't worry, I won't cause a scene. But remember this moment, Greg. You might find it significant later. The Human Resources office was sterile. White walls, minimal decoration, and Natalie Pham's sympathetic but practiced expression. She was new to the company, having joined just 6 months ago, and I could see she was uncomfortable with the situation. I'm sorry about this, Morgan, she said, sliding separation papers across her desk. And I'm very sorry about your mother. Thank you, I replied, scanning the documents. Standard severance, 2 weeks' pay, a non-disparagement clause, a reminder of my non-compete agreement, which prohibited me from working for direct competitors for 6 months. Is there anything I should know about why this happened? Natalie asked cautiously. This seems sudden. I considered how much to share, then decided on the truth. I took out my phone and showed her the email. 3 days of approved bereavement leave, and I'm fired for not prioritizing work. Natalie's professional demeanor slipped, her eyes widening. This is the actual termination notice? Just an email? No performance improvement plan? No documented warnings? Nothing? She frowned, making a note on her legal pad. I need to verify some things with the legal department. Would you excuse me for a moment? While Natalie stepped out, I gazed through the window. From this floor, I could see the Cascade River winding through the city. My mother had loved that river. She taught me patience there, standing in waders as the current flowed past our knees. The river moves, Morgan dear, she'd say, but the stones remain firm. Be like the stones. Natalie returned 20 minutes later, her expression carefully neutral, but her tight smile told me everything. Nothing would change. Unfortunately, Washington is an at-will employment state, she began. The company is within its rights to... I understand, I interrupted, signing the documents without further debate. Peak Valley can do whatever it wants, just like I can. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. Off the record, this isn't right. If you wanted to pursue action... I don't, I said firmly. But thank you. As I walked through the main office toward the exit, I felt eyes following me. My team watched silently, their faces somber. I gave them a small smile, my last act as their leader. Outside, the September air was surprisingly mild. I placed my box in the trunk of my car and sat in the driver's seat, allowing myself a moment to process everything. My phone chimed with a text message, then another, and another. Eric, this is wrong. What can we do? Rebecca, are you okay? Can we meet later? Nathan, Greg's a gutless coward. The team is furious. More messages arrived, expressions of outrage, support, loyalty. These people weren't just colleagues. They were my professional family. I started my car, a plan already forming in my mind. I wouldn't confront Peak Valley directly. I wouldn't sue, though I probably had grounds. No, I would be strategic, patient, like my mother taught me. The stones stay firm while the river rushes past. My phone rang. It was Julia Blackwell, the CEO of Summit Global Logistics, Peak Valley's biggest competitor. We'd met at an industry conference last year and stayed in touch. She'd been trying to recruit me for months. It was time to return her call. The Summit Global Logistics office was everything Peak Valley wasn't. Open concept, collaborative workspaces, and large windows framing the Seattle skyline. Julia Blackwell, a tall woman with silver hair and perceptive eyes, welcomed me with a warm handshake. I've been hoping you'd call, she said, guiding me to a conference room. though I admit I didn't expect it would be under these circumstances. News traveled fast in our industry. Julia already knew about my termination, though not the details. I filled her in as we sat down, showing her Greg's email. That's not just poor management, Julia said, frowning. That's inhumane. Bereavement leave exists for a reason. Peak Valley has always valued profits over people, I replied. I just never thought I'd be on the receiving end. Julia leaned forward. I'll be direct, Morgan. I want you on my team. Summit is expanding our Pacific Northwest operations, and we need someone with your expertise. The division director position is yours if you want it. My heart skipped. Division director, a significant promotion from my role at Peak Valley. More responsibility, more authority, better pay. What about my non-compete? I asked. Julia smiled. Our legal team has reviewed it. It's excessively broad and likely unenforceable. Plus, we'd cover any legal expenses if Peak Valley tried to enforce it. I'd need to consider it, I said carefully. Of course, Julia replied. Take the weekend. We can discuss specifics on Monday. That evening, I met Rebecca and Eric at Shoreline Brewing, a small pub away from downtown where we wouldn't likely encounter other Peak Valley employees. They arrived together, their expressions a mix of anger and concern. How are you holding up? Rebecca asked, sliding into the booth. I'm okay, I assured them. It's been a difficult couple of weeks, but I'll be fine. Eric snorted. Greg's an idiot. The office is already in chaos. Nobody knows where the Martinez proposal files are stored, and the system access you had hasn't been transferred to anyone else. That sounds like a Greg problem, I replied, taking a sip of my water. Rebecca leaned forward. It's more than that. Everyone's talking, not just our team. People are furious about how you were treated. I hadn't expected that. Really? You were respected, Morgan, Eric said. Not just by us. The way Greg handled this, people are worried now. If they do this to you, their star team lead, what would they do to anyone else? Rebecca nodded. Richard has been asking questions. The district manager looks concerned. Good, I said simply. As we talked, more texts arrived from other team members, similar stories of disorganization, frustration, and anger at management. Peak Valley was feeling my absence already. What will you do now? Eric asked. I hesitated. I've had an offer from Summit. Their eyes widened. But your non-compete? Those aren't always enforceable, Rebecca said quickly. She worked with contracts daily and knew the legalities. Especially if they fired you without cause? That's what Summit's legal team said, but it's still a risk. Eric's phone buzzed. He checked it and frowned. Greg's calling an emergency meeting tomorrow morning, Saturday. He's never done that before. The Thompson account review is due Monday, Rebecca explained to me. Nobody can find your analysis files. I smiled slightly. Those files were properly stored on the company server, but my particular organizational system wasn't immediately obvious to others. I hadn't anticipated this would become an issue, but I couldn't deny feeling a flicker of satisfaction. I should get going, I said, gathering my purse. Early appointment tomorrow. As I stood to leave, Eric caught my eye. Morgan, if you did go to Summit, hypothetically speaking, would they be hiring? I paused, studying their faces. Hypothetically? Yes, they're expanding rapidly. The look that passed between Eric and Rebecca told me everything. Saturday morning, I met with Marcus Diaz, an employment lawyer recommended by a friend. His office was small but elegant, with diplomas from prestigious universities adorning the walls. I explained my situation, showing him the email and termination notice. This is textbook wrongful termination, Marcus said, removing his glasses. Firing someone for taking approved bereavement leave could be argued as both a breach of contract and a violation of good faith. I'm not interested in suing, I clarified. I just want to understand my options regarding my non-compete agreement. Marcus reviewed the document carefully. This is overly restrictive. 6 months prohibition on working for competitors within a 300-mile radius? That's essentially telling you to leave the industry or relocate. Is it enforceable? I asked. In Washington, it's questionable, especially given the circumstances of your termination. Courts typically won't enforce non-competes when the employer acts in bad faith. He leaned back in his chair. What's your plan, Morgan? Summit Global Logistics has offered me a position. Better title, better pay. Marcus nodded. Peak Valley would have to prove that you're causing them actual harm by working there. Given that they terminated you, that's a difficult argument to make. He scribbled some notes. I'd say proceed with caution, but don't let this non-compete prevent you from earning a living. Over the weekend, my phone continued buzzing with messages from my former team. The emergency Saturday meeting had apparently been tense. Greg was pressuring everyone to take on additional responsibilities to cover my absence with no extra compensation. The Thompson account files had been located, but nobody fully understood my analysis methodology. By Sunday evening, I had made my decision. Monday morning, I called Julia Blackwell. I accept your offer, I told her, but I have one condition. Name it, Julia replied. I want to build my own team. If my former colleagues from Peak Valley apply to Summit, I want them to receive fair consideration. Absolutely, Julia agreed. If they're half as talented as you, we'd be lucky to have them. That afternoon, I signed my contract with Summit, Division Director of Pacific Northwest Operations. The salary was 40% higher than what I'd been making at Peak Valley, with better benefits and a sign-on bonus. As I left Summit's offices, I checked my phone to find 7 new messages, one from each core member of my former team. They all wanted to meet for coffee, privately. Tuesday morning, I sat at a quiet corner table in a small coffee shop downtown, waiting. Eric arrived first, then Rebecca. One by one, Nathan, Angela, Monica, Sophia, and Jack joined us until we filled 2 tables pulled together. Peak Valley is imploding, Nathan said without preamble. Greg's micromanaging everyone. Richard is breathing down his neck and clients are asking questions. The Thompson account is threatening to pull out, Rebecca added. They wanted to know why you weren't handling their renewal. I sipped my coffee, listening as each shared similar stories of chaos and frustration. We heard you've accepted a position at Summit, Eric finally said. The others grew quiet, watching me intently. News travels fast, I observed. We want to come with you, Rebecca stated firmly. The others nodded in agreement. I studied their faces. You all have good positions at Peak Valley. Secure jobs. Are you sure you want to risk that? What security? Angela asked bitterly. If they'd fire you for attending your mother's funeral, none of us are safe. Summit is hiring, I said carefully. I can't promise anything, but I can refer you. Each of you would need to apply formally. We already have, Sophia revealed, pulling out printed copies of confirmation emails. All 7 of us. Yesterday. I couldn't hide my surprise. You applied before talking to me? We trust you, Morgan, Jack said simply. Where you go, we go. I felt a surge of emotion, gratitude mixed with vindication. Let me make some calls. The following Monday, my phone rang at 7:30 a.m. The caller ID displayed Richard Bennett, Peak Valley's district manager. Morgan, Richard's voice had a forced calmness. We need to talk. Good morning, Richard, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What can I do for you? I've just received 7 resignation letters, all from your former team, all effective immediately. There was a pause. Care to explain? I took a slow breath. I'm not sure what explanation you're looking for. I don't work for Peak Valley anymore. They're all going to Summit, where you just started as division director. His voice hardened. This doesn't look coincidental. People make career choices for various reasons, Richard. Perhaps you should ask Greg why your top-performing team is leaving en masse. This is about your termination, isn't it? He sounded resigned now. I've reviewed the situation. Greg didn't consult me before letting you go. I would never have approved it. That's between you and Greg, I replied. Though I'm curious why Peak Valley's district manager wasn't involved in terminating a team lead. Richard sighed. Greg claimed it was an urgent performance issue that couldn't wait for my return from the Portland conference. I trusted his judgment. Clearly, that was a mistake. I said nothing, letting the silence grow uncomfortable. Look, Morgan, Richard finally continued. I'm prepared to offer you your position back with a 10% raise and a formal apology. We need your expertise. The Thompson account is threatening to walk. I appreciate the offer, Richard, but I've accepted a position elsewhere. We'll match whatever they're paying, plus 15%. It's not about the money. Then what would it take? There was desperation in his voice now. 7 key employees walking out simultaneously is devastating. The operational knowledge alone. It would take time travel, I interrupted. Going back to when my mother died, and Peak Valley showing basic human decency instead of punishing me for grieving. The line went quiet. I need to go, Richard. I start my new position today, and I don't want to be late. Your non-compete, he began. Feel free to have your legal team contact mine, I replied evenly, though they might want to review the circumstances of my termination first. After hanging up, I drove to Summit's offices, arriving early to prepare for the day. Julia met me in the lobby, beaming. We're considering all 7 of your former colleagues, she said. Their qualifications are impressive. Interviews start Wednesday. Thank you for giving them a fair chance, I replied. Fair chance? Morgan, their top talent. Peak Valley's mistake is our gain. 2 days later, I received another call, this time from Natalie Pham in Human Resources at Peak Valley. I shouldn't be telling you this, she said quietly, but Greg Turner has been placed on administrative leave pending review. Richard is launching an investigation into management practices, particularly around bereavement and time-off policies. That's good to hear, I said genuinely. The board of directors is involved now, Natalie continued. Losing an entire specialized team to a competitor has triggered alarm bells. They're reviewing all terminations from the past year. By Friday, all 7 of my former team members had received and accepted offers from Summit. We met for dinner to celebrate, raising glasses in a toast. To new beginnings, Rebecca said. And to Morgan, Eric added, who taught us what real leadership looks like. The following week, I received a formal letter from Peak Valley acknowledging my wrongful termination and offering a settlement to avoid litigation. I accepted it, not for the money, but for the official admission that they had been wrong. That same day, the Thompson account signed with Summit, bringing their business to us after learning that their preferred team now worked under my direction. The river had moved, but we had remained firm, like stones, just as my mother had taught me. 3 months later, I stood at the front of Summit's largest conference room, presenting our quarterly results to the executive team. The numbers spoke for themselves. 30% growth in our division, 4 major client acquisitions, 3 of them former Peak Valley accounts, and operational efficiency improvements that had reduced costs by 22%. Exceptional work, Morgan, Julia said when I finished. You and your team have exceeded every projection. I smiled. My team deserves the credit. They've been remarkable. After the meeting, I returned to my office to find my 7 core team members waiting with a cake. What's this for? I asked. It's been exactly 3 months since we all jumped ship together, Eric explained. We're celebrating our Independence Day. I laughed. You're all ridiculous. But happy, Rebecca added. Seriously, Morgan, everyone's thriving here. It was true. Each team member had grown professionally in their new roles at Summit. They had more autonomy, better resources, and were finally receiving recognition for their contributions. Most importantly, they were valued as people, not just productivity machines. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Peak Valley Shipping announces restructuring amid client exodus. I showed it to the group. I heard they lost the Rodriguez contract last week, Nathan said, cutting cake slices. That's 20% of their Pacific Northwest revenue. Greg's gone, Angela added. Cleared out his office Friday. Richard is trying to save what's left. But I felt no pleasure in Peak Valley's struggles, only a sense of justice. The company wasn't failing because we had left. It was failing because its leadership had created a culture where employees were disposable, where attending a mother's funeral was considered a lack of commitment. I raised my water glass. May they learn that a company is only as strong as how they treat their people. And to Morgan, Sophia added, who showed us we deserved better. 6 months after joining Summit, I received an unexpected lunch invitation from Richard Bennett. He'd left Peak Valley and joined a management consulting firm specializing in organizational culture. We met at a quiet restaurant overlooking the Cascade River. Richard looked different, more relaxed, the perpetual stress lines around his eyes softened. Thank you for meeting me, he began. I wanted to apologize properly for what happened. You weren't directly responsible, I reminded him. No, but I created the environment that made it possible. He sighed. After you and your team left, everything unraveled. The board brought in external consultants to evaluate what went wrong. The report wasn't flattering to any of us in leadership. I nodded, waiting for him to continue. Peak Valley is being acquired by Northern Transit, Richard revealed. At a fraction of its previous valuation. They're basically buying the client list and physical assets. The news didn't surprise me. Peak Valley had been hemorrhaging clients and talent for months. What about Greg? I asked. Still unemployed, last I heard. His reputation in the industry. He trailed off. Let's just say your story has circulated widely. I hadn't spread the details of my termination, but I hadn't hidden them either. When asked why I'd left Peak Valley, I told the simple truth. I've learned a valuable lesson from all this, Richard continued. Now I'm helping other companies avoid the same mistakes. As we finished lunch, Richard asked the question I sensed had been on his mind all along. Was it worth it? Walking away quietly instead of fighting? I thought about my team at Summit, thriving, motivated, and treated with respect. I thought about the clients who had followed us, who now received better service. I thought about my mother, who had taught me that sometimes the strongest response isn't the loudest. Yes, I replied simply. The results speak for themselves. 1 year after that fateful email that had changed the course of my career, Summit named me Executive Vice President of Operations for the entire Northwest region. My division had become the company's crown jewel, efficient, innovative, and boasting the highest employee satisfaction scores in the organization. Each of my 7 team members had been promoted as well. Eric now led his own division. Rebecca had transformed our client relations approach and earned recognition throughout the industry. The others had similarly distinguished themselves, their talents finally receiving the appreciation they deserved. On the anniversary of my termination from Peak Valley, I received a small package in the mail. Inside was my old succulent plant, now slightly larger but still thriving, with a note from Natalie Pham. Rescued this from your desk. Thought you might want it back now. Peak Valley closes for good next week. I placed the succulent on my windowsill where it would get plenty of sunlight. Like me, it had survived being discarded and found a better place to grow. That evening, I drove to the Cascade River and stood on the bank where my mother and I used to fish. The water flowed steadily around the stones, just as it always had. I thought about how a single moment, a cold email terminating my employment, had ultimately led to greater success and happiness. Not just for me, but for everyone who had followed me. You were right, Mom, I whispered to the river. Sometimes you need to stay firm and let the current do its work. As I looked back on my journey from terminated team lead to executive vice president, I realized my revenge hadn't been in destroying Peak Valley. My revenge had been in building something better. A workplace where bereavement leave wasn't viewed as a lack of commitment, where people were valued beyond their productivity metrics, where leadership meant empowering others rather than controlling them. The greatest revenge wasn't in tearing down what had hurt me, but in creating something that made the old system obsolete. My mother would have been proud of that. Looking toward the future, I felt nothing but gratitude for the path that had brought me here. even the painful parts. Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best outcomes. If you remain as steady as the stones while the river of change rushes past,